Welcome back to Scripture Horror. Today I'm bringing you SIX of the most bone-chilling true horror accounts ever uncovered from America's vast highway system. In this episode, we descend into the shadows that cling to our nation's truck routes, exploring nightmarish encounters born from endless stretches of asphalt and the brutal loneliness of the open road. These aren't crafted tales or fictional frights. They are raw testimonies gathered from long-haul truckers who witnessed things that break every rule of reality and survived events that scarred them forever. Each narrative has been carefully assembled from in-depth interviews, driver incident logs, and first-hand witness statements from those brave enough to share what happened to them. From phantom figures that tail semis across multiple states to forbidden cargo that never should have been hauled, these accounts expose the darkest corners of America's transportation backbone. They span from the fog-drenched roads of Maine to the empty, wind-beaten plains of Montana, each marked with the unmistakable stamp of truth that only real terror can leave behind. To protect the safety and privacy of those involved, certain names, locations, and specific identifiers have been altered, while the core horror of each event remains untouched. If you're new to Scripture Horror, be sure to subscribe for daily doses of authentic fear that will challenge everything you think you know about the world. Turn on notifications so you never miss our deep dives into the files documenting humanity's most disturbing encounters. Now, let us begin our descent into the true horrors of America's highways. The CB radio crackled to life at 11:42 p.m. as Jake Martinez guided his Kenworth T680 down Interstate 40 through the empty Arizona desert. Static shivered through the cab, a restless hiss that filled the silence before a gravelly voice punched through the white noise. Breaker 19. This is Desert Fox. Any drivers heading eastbound past Flagstaff tonight? Jake reached for his handset, grateful for the sound of another human voice after hours of nothing but darkness, endless asphalt, and the hypnotic pulse of his engine. This is Rolling Thunder, he replied. Eastbound, mile marker 212. What's your 20? About 10 miles behind you, Desert Fox answered. Rolling Thunder, I need you to take something real serious. You seen anything walking alongside your rig tonight? The question froze Jake's breath. In 14 years of long-haul trucking, he'd heard every wild story the CB could produce. Ghost hitchhikers, phantom cars with no drivers, floating lights that paced rigs for miles. Most were nothing more than hallucinations born from fatigue and too much caffeine. But something in Desert Fox's voice wasn't the usual tired rambling. There was weight behind it. Fear. Walking alongside my truck, Jake forced out a laugh. Brother, I'm doing 70. Nothing walks that fast except maybe a roadrunner overdosed on meth. I'm not talking about birds, Rolling Thunder, Desert Fox said, voice dropping. I'm talking about something that looks like a person. Tall, thin. Keeps perfect pace with a tractor trailer no matter how fast you go. Always stays just outside the headlight beam. Right where you can barely see it. Jake glanced into the passenger side mirror, staring into the swallowing dark, stretching beyond his running lights. Nothing. Just Joshua trees, broken rock, and desert shadows painted silver by the moon. Desert Fox, you need sleep. Your mind's playing tricks on you. That's what I thought too. Until I started asking around. Turns out plenty of drivers seen it on this stretch between Flagstaff and Albuquerque. They don't talk about it because they're scared folks will call them crazy. But it's real. And it's out there tonight. The radio went dead except for static. Jake tried calling him back. Nothing. Desert Fox was gone. Jake pushed a little harder on the accelerator, anxious to put distance between himself and whatever delusion had taken hold of the other driver. Arizona highways at night had a way of bending reality. Isolation, endless miles of desert, the kind of silence that pressed against the windows. It could make anything seem alive. But Jake wasn't a rookie. He'd been running the Southwest since he left the Marines in 2009. He knew every rest stop, every speed trap, every lonely mile between Los Angeles and Dallas. The desert held no secrets for him, only landmarks he'd memorized to repetition. His manifest was clean. Agricultural equipment bound for Little Rock. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing strange. But as mile after mile slid beneath his wheels, he began noticing something flickering at the edge of his peripheral vision. At first he dismissed it as fatigue. Long-haul drivers all learned the tricks the mind played when exhaustion crept in. Highway hypnosis made shadows stretch and merge, made bushes seem like crouching people, made movement where none existed. The cure was simple: pull over, take a nap, splash water on your face. But this wasn't the drifting shapes of sleep deprivation. It didn't vanish when he blinked or shook his head. It stayed. A tall shape pacing him at the very edge of the beam. When he looked directly toward it, it disappeared. When he looked forward again, it returned. Always in the same place. Always matching speed. Mile marker 230 flashed by in a blur of yellow paint. Jake switched channels on the CB, listening to chatter from other drivers. Weather. Fuel prices. Construction warnings. Normal things. Comforting things. Nothing about shadow figures sprinting beside 18-wheelers. The shape returned more often as he descended toward Winslow. What had been occasional glimmers became something constant. Persistent. Growing bolder with each passing mile. Jake could make out movement now. Dark clothing fluttering in the artificial wind. Arms too long. A stride too smooth. Too fast. Too effortless. No jogging. No struggling. Just gliding across the desert floor like it weighed nothing. And he was going 73. At mile 244, Jake abandoned efficiency and pulled into a rest area, violating every instinct of a driver pushing to meet a delivery schedule. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for a single car whose occupants were sleeping inside. Jake stepped down from the cab, the sudden silence hitting him like a thick wall after hours of engine noise. He walked the length of his trailer, checking straps and tires, using routine to hide the fact that he was scanning the darkness. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Just the desert spreading out in all directions. Low hills curled like sleeping animals under the moon. Feeling foolish, Jake climbed back in and got moving again. But as soon as he merged onto I-40, the figure reappeared, this time on the driver's side. It stayed perfectly parallel to his cab, its proportions wrong in a way his brain refused to fully understand. Too tall, too thin, its head tilted at an impossible angle, as if broken long ago and never healed. It moved with a loping, unnatural gait, covering impossible distance with every stride. Mile marker 261 passed. Jake's fear began as a knot in his stomach and crawled upward with every second the figure remained. He sped up. It sped up. He slowed down. It slowed down, as though tethered to his truck by invisible lines. The CB snapped alive again. Breaker 19 for Rolling Thunder. You out there? A new voice. Calm. Older. This is Nighthawk, westbound, mile marker 258. Jake grabbed the mic. I hear you, Nighthawk. Rolling Thunder, I don't want to freak you out, but I just passed something running beside an eastbound rig. Couldn't see it well in the headlights, but it wasn't normal. Looked human, but wrong. You see anything strange over there? Jake's pulse thudded. Another driver had seen it. This wasn't a hallucination. It was real, and it was following his truck. Nighthawk, it's been keeping pace with me for 30 miles, he said, voice shaking. What the hell is it? Don't know. Heard stories, though. They call it the Shadow Walker. Shows up on lonely stretches, follows rigs. Sometimes taps on the trailer, like it's trying to. As if summoned by the mention, the figure suddenly darted forward, then dropped back, then slid to the passenger side. Its movements were deliberate, patterned, like someone trying to send a message. Jake's trailer creaked as cargo shifted through the straps. The sound seemed to excite the thing. It moved faster, crossing in front of the truck in long, floating leaps before returning to his door. Nighthawk, Jake said, adrenaline surging. It's getting more active. I think it knows we're talking. Rolling Thunder, listen to me, Nighthawk replied. Get to the next truck stop. Do not stop anywhere isolated. Get around people. See if it follows you into the lights. The nearest truck stop was 34 miles away. Jake pressed his accelerator. 78, 81, 85. The Shadow Walker didn't fall behind. If anything, it seemed amused. At mile marker 275, the sound came. A sharp, unmistakable tapping on the rear doors of his trailer. Rhythmic. Moving forward along the length of the truck until it reached just behind the cab. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Pause. 3 long taps. Jake's blood iced. "SOS," he whispered. "Nighthawk, it's tapping SOS." "Oh God," Nighthawk replied. "Don't respond. Don't acknowledge. Just get to the truck stop." But the tapping grew louder, more insistent. Scraping joined it, long fingernails dragging across aluminum, screeching over the hum of the engine. The agricultural equipment inside clattered and shifted as though something outside was pushing on the walls, testing the trailer's integrity. The lights of the truck stop finally appeared on the horizon like a mirage. Jake flew down the off-ramp, ignoring the posted speed limit entirely. Diesel engines idled in the lot, glowing under neon signage. Civilization alive, bright, safely human. He slammed into a parking slot between two rigs and killed the engine. The scratching stopped instantly. The tapping ceased. The shadow walker vanished. Jake sat in his dark cab for long minutes, his heart thundering, hands shaking, staring into mirrors reflecting nothing but stillness and distant highway noise. 2 days later, Jake heard the news. Desert Fox, the driver who first warned him, was found dead in his cab at a rest area near Gallup. Official cause, heart failure. But other drivers whispered about the long scratches gouged deep into both sides of his trailer. The CB radio smashed to pieces. The look of terror frozen on his face. Jake never drove the I-40 Arizona corridor again. And he never used the handle Rolling Thunder after that night. Melissa Rodriguez stared at her reflection in the harsh fluorescent bathroom lights of the Flying J truck stop outside Amarillo, Texas, and instantly felt something was wrong. The face in the mirror was hers. Same long dark hair pulled into a tired ponytail, same faint crow's feet from years behind the wheel. But the eyes were off. Not the color, not the shape. Something behind them. A cold, calculating sharpness that didn't belong to her. For a split second, the woman staring back wasn't just tired. She was something else entirely, something watching her. She blinked hard, splashed ice-cold water on her face, and leaned forward again. Normal brown eyes greeted her this time, familiar and worn from 14 hours of non-stop driving. She exhaled shakily, reminding herself she knew the signs of fatigue-induced hallucinations. Truckers learn them the hard way. And what she'd just seen fit, the pattern perfectly. Her mind playing tricks, nothing more. She dried her face with stiff paper towels and stepped back into the night air, weaving through the maze of idling trucks. The parking lot buzzed with the usual late-night rhythm, air brakes hissing, engines rumbling, drivers conducting walkarounds or grabbing food before their next stretch of highway. It was familiar comfort, the kind that kept long-haul loneliness from swallowing a person whole. But halfway back to her Freightliner Cascadia, Melissa froze. 2 drivers were standing near a picnic table, and a single sentence drifted to her on the dry Texas wind, careless and enough to make her blood run ice-cold. "Yeah, that Rodriguez woman on the Dallas to Phoenix run. Border Patrol caught her trying to sell cargo near Barstow. Found nearly a dozen illegals in her trailer." Melissa felt the world tilt. She stopped walking, pretending to check her phone while focusing on every word. One of the men continued, each detail more unreal than the last. "That's not all. I heard she's running drugs now too. Uses that single mom sob story to throw off suspicion. DEA finally nabbed her last week. She's bad news. You see her rig, keep your distance." Her pulse hammered. Someone with her name. Her route. Her exact description. And the trucking community, where reputation spread faster than wildfire, was already cementing her guilt. She stepped toward the 2 men, forcing calm into her voice. "Excuse me, what Rodriguez are you talking about?" The bearded driver, Bill, someone she'd chatted with before at rest stops, shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, just repeating what I heard on the CB. Don't want to get involved in anything." "I'm Melissa Rodriguez," she said firmly. "Dallas to Phoenix is my route." "Whoever you're talking about." "It's not me." Bill exchanged a look with his friend, a look that screamed doubt. "Well, all I'm saying is be careful. Heat's real bad on drivers with your name." Her stomach twisted. Identity theft was one thing, but someone using her name, her route, her trucker persona to commit federal crimes? That was career-ending, life-ending. She immediately called her dispatcher. "Rodriguez Transport Solutions. This is Janet." "Janet, it's Melissa." Have you gotten any complaints about my deliveries? Anything strange? A short silence. Then Janet asked, cautious, Melissa, where are you calling from? You just phoned me 20 minutes ago reporting a breakdown outside Tucumcari. Melissa's throat dried. Janet, I'm at a truck stop in Amarillo. I haven't called you today. Another long pause. I'm staring at my call log. It was your number, and the voice sounded exactly like you. Whoever called knew your cargo details, your schedule, everything. Janet, someone is impersonating me. They're using my identity, my truck details, everything. You need to contact insurance and DOT right now. There's something else, Janet said quietly. Law enforcement has been calling about you. Asking for employment records, cargo manifests. I assumed it was routine, but now, Melissa didn't wait to hear more. She hung up, heart racing, staring at the blur of truck stop activity around her. Everything she'd built, her job, her reputation, her ability to provide for her kids, was hanging by a thread. Someone had copied her life so perfectly they fooled her dispatcher. She climbed into her truck, started the engine, and pulled onto the highway, determined to get her legitimate cargo to Phoenix before things spiraled even further. But as she merged onto I-40 westbound, she spotted headlights in her mirrors. Another Freightliner, Cascadia, identical to hers. Same company decals. Same DOT number. Same every detail. It kept a perfect distance. Far enough to avoid scrutiny. Close enough to track her. She grabbed her CB, hands shaking. Breaker 19. This is Desert Rose. The driver about a mile behind me. I need to talk to you. Static crackled. Then a voice answered. Her own voice. This is Desert Rose. What truck are you talking about? No one's following me. Melissa's breath caught. She was talking to herself. Or someone who sounded exactly like her, tone, rhythm, accent. Who are you? She demanded. Why are you impersonating me? A polite, icy version of her voice replied. I think you're confused. I'm Melissa Rodriguez, hauling electronics from Dallas to Phoenix. Please stop harassing me. Other truckers chimed in, confused by what sounded like a woman arguing with herself. Melissa switched channels, but every attempt to explain made her sound more unhinged. The duplicate truck followed her for another 10 miles before slipping onto an exit ramp near Tucumcari. Melissa wanted to chase it. But she had a delivery deadline and now a federal nightmare. Waiting. She noted the exit number and mile marker to report later, then pushed on. But the nightmare only intensified when she stopped for fuel in Albuquerque. The fuel island attendant, a young man named Carlos, approached with visible hostility. You've got some nerve coming back here after last week. I've never been here, Melissa said, baffled. You threatened my manager. Screamed that you'd shut us down for health code violations because he wouldn't let you use the showers for free. We had to call the cops. Melissa showed him her logbook proving she'd been in Oklahoma and Arkansas that week, not even close to New Mexico. But Carlos remained unconvinced. Other drivers eyed her with suspicion. Then, a New Mexico State Police cruiser pulled up, lights flashing. Officer Patricia Hernandez approached, tense hand hovering near her weapon. Ma'am, CDL and cargo manifest. Melissa handed them over, trying desperately to explain. Hernandez listened, but her expression didn't soften. She ran Melissa's info, returned 10 minutes later with a grim face. Ms. Rodriguez, there are several active investigations under your name. Federal agencies want to speak with you immediately. Officer, I'm the victim here. Someone is copying my identity. That may be true, Hernandez said calmly, but until it's cleared up, you need to come with me. Melissa spent the next 4 hours in an interrogation room facing ICE agent Maria Santos and DEA agent David Kim. They laid out photo after photo across the table. Surveillance stills from truck stops and border checkpoints, each showing a woman identical to Melissa driving a truck identical to hers. Ms. Rodriguez, Agent Santos said, these images were taken over the past 18 months at several suspected trafficking locations. I wasn't at any of these places, Melissa insisted. My logs prove it. My fuel receipts. Everything. Agent Kim placed new documents in front of her. We also have receipts with your credit card. Vehicle logs with your DOT number. Witness statements confirming you were physically present. Melissa stared at a parallel version of her life, perfectly documented, perfectly forged. Someone had created a second Melissa, a second truck, a second timeline filled with crimes. "Agents," she whispered. "Someone is framing me. They have my information, my truck specs, even my voice." The interrogation only got worse. She learned the impersonator had been recruiting drivers to haul contraband. Those who refused disappeared, their identities absorbed into the growing network. When she was finally released, Agent Santos warned her quietly, "If you're innocent, you're in danger. The impersonator is eliminating anyone who threatens their operation." By midnight, Melissa was back behind the wheel, exhausted and terrified. Her delivery was hours behind, her reputation ruined, and federal agencies saw her as a suspect. She pulled onto I-40, heading toward Phoenix. Then she saw the headlights again, the identical Freightliner. This time, it was closing in fast. The driver wasn't keeping distance anymore. They were coming for her. Melissa floored the accelerator, her truck roaring dangerously above safe limits. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, dark, empty, unforgiving. Her survival depended on reaching populated areas before the doppelganger could isolate her again. Behind her, the duplicate flashed its headlights in a taunting rhythm, a predator enjoying the chase. She grabbed her CB. "Mayday. This is the real Melissa Rodriguez. I'm being chased by someone impersonating me. Anyone call law enforcement." Instantly, her own voice cut in. "This is Melissa Rodriguez. There is no emergency. Please disregard." Someone's pulling pranks. The duplicate truck drew close enough for Melissa to see the driver clearly in her mirror. It was her. The same face she'd seen in the Amarillo bathroom mirror, cold, calculating, hunting. And the real chase was only beginning. Bobby Thompson had been working the loading docks for 23 years, and in all that time, he had never seen cargo like this. The warehouse stood in an aging industrial district outside Louisville, Kentucky, where the Ohio River curved through neighborhoods that had lost their shine decades ago. Almost every freight facility in that area handled ordinary shipments: auto parts, agricultural machinery, consumer goods headed to distribution centers across the Midwest. But the cargo being loaded into Bobby's trailer at 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning didn't fit into any category he recognized. The containers were constructed from brushed steel without a single manufacturer's mark, serial code, or hazmat designation. Each was a perfect 12 by 6 by 6 foot rectangle, identical down to the last bolt, and each was so unnaturally heavy that the crew needed specialized lifting equipment to move them. The loading crew themselves were strangers. Bobby had worked out of Louisville long enough to know every regular on every shift, but these men wore unmarked coveralls and worked in total silence, never speaking, communicating instead through hand signals and deliberate eye movements. They avoided eye contact with Bobby as if even a glance might break some rule they were all sworn to follow. "What am I hauling?" Bobby finally asked the shift supervisor, a slender man named Edwards who had appeared at the warehouse only 3 weeks earlier. Edwards didn't look up from his clipboard. "Specialized medical equipment," he said. "Destination is a research facility in Lexington. Very sensitive cargo. Very important clients. You follow the route exactly as specified. No deviations, no unnecessary stops." The shipping manifest felt wrong in Bobby's hands. It listed the cargo as biomed research materials at a combined weight of 46,000 pounds, destined for an address on the outskirts of Lexington. But when Bobby checked the coordinates on his GPS, they pointed to what looked like empty farmland. "Edwards, this delivery address doesn't match any facility I know," he said. "You sure these coordinates are correct?" The supervisor didn't look up. "The address is correct. The facility is new, not yet listed in commercial databases. You'll see the building when you arrive." The loading process took nearly an hour, way too long for cargo that fit comfortably in Bobby's trailer. The crew moved with practiced precision, handling each container like it might explode at any moment. They installed heavy tie-downs and extra padding far beyond legal requirements. And Bobby noticed something else. Several containers were wired to small electronic devices that emitted intermittent beeps. "What are the monitoring devices for?" he asked. "Temperature and humidity sensors," Edwards replied. "The cargo is extremely sensitive. If an alarm sounds, you notify the dispatcher immediately. Bobby climbed into his Peterbilt, fired up the engine, and watched from the mirror as the silent crew sealed the trailer doors using thick metallic bands with no logos or markings. The warehouse district was deserted at that hour, lit only by weak security lamps and the soft glow of downtown Louisville in the distance. His route instructions were strict: take Highway 52 southeast, then follow a series of back roads, avoiding every major town along the way. The first 30 miles passed quietly. Bobby kept his speed locked at the mandated 55 miles per hour, checking his mirrors and glancing occasionally at the internal trailer camera. The containers seemed secure, and the monitoring devices beeped steadily. Outside, the October night was crisp, with thin sheets of fog forming in the dips between rolling hills. At mile marker 91, the first wrong sound appeared. It began as a faint hum barely audible over the diesel engine. At first, Bobby assumed it was a mechanical vibration or the rumble of the trailer in the wind. But the hum grew stronger, richer, unmistakably coming from inside the cargo. And it wasn't mechanical. It rose and fell in organic waves, patterns that reminded Bobby disturbingly of breathing or heartbeats. He switched the trailer camera on, but the containers looked exactly the same, silent steel blocks secured in place. Yet the hum intensified. The monitoring devices began beeping faster, their once steady rhythm turning into a sharp, urgent pulse. He reached for the CB to call dispatch, but when he tuned to the channel, only static hissed through the speaker. He grabbed his cell phone. No service, not even one bar. He drove this route often and never had signal problems, but tonight the screen showed nothing. The hum deepened. Bobby realized more than one container was making the sound. Each emitted a different frequency, forming a sickening harmony that made the skin on his arms prickle. Through the camera, he saw several monitoring devices flashing bright red warning lights. Instinct screamed at him to pull over. He found a small rest area near Bardstown and eased the truck to a stop. But when he stepped down from the cab, he froze. The rest area was wrong. It was completely empty, not just of people but of everything. Parking spaces, pavement, the restroom building. They were all there. But there were no trash cans, no picnic tables, no vending machines, no signs or posted instructions. It looked like a location built for a movie scene, half constructed and then abandoned. The humming from his trailer had grown louder. Now he heard more, scratching, like fingernails dragging across metal, tapping in rhythmic patterns, and something worse, muffled voices whispering in fragmented, unrecognizable languages. Bobby walked to the trailer, heart pounding, and tried the doors, but the seals were impossible to break without destroying the metal bands. If he tampered with them, he'd violate his contract. He returned to his cab, shaking, and found that his GPS had completely malfunctioned. The screen showed a blank void, no roads, no landmarks, just a blinking dot in empty space. According to the device, he was traveling through nowhere toward coordinates that didn't exist. He restarted it twice and got the same impossible reading. With no other choice, Bobby drove on, following Highway 52 by memory and road signs. But the deeper he went into the countryside, the more the landscape warped. Trees grew in unnatural geometric clusters. Farmhouses flickered between states of decay, occupied one moment, abandoned the next. A grain silo he passed was rusted on one side and freshly painted on the other, like it existed across multiple times simultaneously. The noises in the trailer worsened. The humming transformed into something almost like singing, multiple voices weaving through harmonies no human throat could produce. The scratching intensified. The container walls shuddered occasionally, as if something inside was pressing outward. At 2:47 a.m., Bobby crested a hill and spotted lights in the valley. But they weren't city lights. They were too bright, arranged in patterns that twisted Bobby's vision, causing a stabbing pain behind his eyes. He descended toward them, clutching the steering wheel, unable to shake the sense that he was approaching something he shouldn't see. What waited for him in the valley was not a warehouse. It wasn't anything he could logically categorize. A massive facility sprawled across several acres of what his GPS still insisted was empty farmland. It was built from the same brushed steel as the cargo containers. No windows. No signs. No identifying marks. Geometric protrusions jutted from the structure at angles that seemed physically impossible, casting shadows that didn't match any identifiable light source. Bobby pulled his truck into a circular loading dock that looked more like an operating theater than anything made for freight. The moment he shut down the engine, the sounds from the trailer stopped. Completely. Every hum, every scratch, every frantic beep vanished, as if silenced by an unseen switch. A figure emerged from the facility and approached. It wore the same unmarked coveralls as the Louisville crew, but its movements made Bobby's stomach twist. It glided more than walked, covering ground with unnatural smoothness. It tapped on his window with fingers that were far too long and slender. "Delivery for Research Complex Omega-9, it said when Bobby rolled the window down. Its voice sounded normal, but its lips didn't move. No breath vapor hung in the cold night air. Bobby fought to keep his voice steady. "I need to see identification and a cargo receipt." The figure handed him documents printed on a material identical to the containers. The English text slid and shifted when Bobby tried to focus on it. Strange symbols branded the letterhead, and the signature resembled a series of equations rather than a name. "Begin unloading process," the figure said. "Remain in vehicle. Do not observe unloading procedures." Bobby wanted to object, but more figures emerged, at least 6 of them, each moving with that same disturbing glide. Their coveralls bulged at unnatural angles, as though hiding shapes that weren't human at all. Bobby forced himself to stare straight ahead as the unloading began. He heard no engines. No hydraulic lifts. Only soft thuds and the faint echo of something massive sliding into place. When the process finished, one figure returned. "Transport contract fulfilled. Return to origin point via designated route. Do not deviate. Do not discuss cargo. Payment will be processed automatically." Bobby drove away, gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles went white. As he climbed the hill, he checked his mirrors and saw the facility dissolve, fading from solid steel to translucent blur to nothing. Within minutes, the valley appeared untouched, as though no structure had ever existed there. His GPS came back to life. His phone regained full service. His CV radio crackled with familiar chatter. Everything was normal again. Except for one thing. His trailer was empty, yet his axle weight sensors claimed he was still hauling 46,000 pounds. Invisible mass. Weight without cargo. Substance without form. Bobby stopped twice on his return route, checking the trailer each time. Nothing. No crates. No residue. No explanation. The phantom weight stayed with him for 3 months before fading without warning. By then, Bobby had quit trucking and taken a job at a furniture store. But late at night, in the stillness of his small apartment, he sometimes heard faint humming, like the echoes of something alive inside steel containers that no longer existed. And he knew, with a certainty that hollowed him out, that some freight should never be delivered, and some destinations should never be reached by human roads. He never drove at night again. Diana Washington pressed the brake pedal harder as her Volvo VNL began losing power on the steep grade outside Grants Pass, Oregon. The temperature gauge surged into the red, warning lights blooming across her dashboard like a hellish constellation. She'd been running this Pacific Northwest corridor for years, hauling timber and plywood between sawmills, but never had she experienced a breakdown on this particular stretch of the Cascades. The engine coughed once, twice, then died entirely, leaving Diana coasting on momentum alone as she guided her 48-foot trailer toward the narrow shoulder of Highway 99. Rain hammered her windshield in relentless sheets, battering her rig as violent crosswinds shoved the trailer like a toy. The storm had been building since late afternoon, and now, in the dead of night, it had become a living thing, roaring, slamming, howling, turning the routine delivery run into something sinister. Diana eased the rig onto a gravel turnout barely wide enough for a semi. Through her rain-blurred windows, she could see only the oppressive loom of forest on both sides of the highway. Towering Douglas firs and massive cedars stretched into the blackness, their crowns lost in the storm. The nearest town, Crescent City, was still miles northwest, and cell service here disappeared even on clear days. On a night like this, it didn't exist at all. She grabbed her flashlight, pulled on her rain gear, and climbed down into the cold deluge. The diesel engine hissed as the rain hit its overheated surfaces. When she popped the hood, the beam of her flashlight revealed the problem: a burst radiator hose, hot coolant pooling beneath the front axle. She carried spares and tools, but replacing a hose in a mountain downpour, in darkness, on a narrow turnout? Not tonight. It would be dangerous at best, fatal at worst. She got back into the cab, shutting out the punishing storm. She set out reflective triangles, activated her hazards, and wrapped herself in her sleeping bag. She tried to settle in, tried to ignore the cold now creeping into the cab without the engine's heat. The wind screamed through the trees, rattling her mirrors. Occasionally the storm was punctuated by the crack of branches giving way or the distant roar of minor landslides rumbling somewhere up the mountain. Diana had fallen asleep on worse nights, in worse places, but this night felt wrong in a way she couldn't explain. At exactly 3:17 a.m., she heard it. A thin wailing sound, faint but unmistakable, threading its way through the storm. It was fragile, childlike, barely audible over the rain, but so out of place it made the hairs on Diana's arms stand on end. She rolled her passenger window down an inch and listened. The sound came from the forest, rising and falling as if whoever was crying was shivering uncontrollably. A child. Somewhere in those woods, her gut twisted. Nobody in their right mind would be out there in this storm, nobody except someone truly lost. She grabbed her flashlight again, zipped her jacket up to her throat, and stepped into the rain. The crying grew clearer with every step she took toward the forest line. Small, desperate, the kind of sobbing that cuts straight into a person's instincts to help. She called out, shouting over the storm, but the crying didn't respond. It only continued, trembling with fear. She pushed through the first line of trees, her flashlight swallowed almost instantly by darkness. The ground was slick with pine needles and mud, masking fallen branches and deep roots that snagged her boots. She kept calling out, following the sound deeper, though each step felt heavier than the last. Then, abruptly, the crying stopped. The storm, too, seemed to ease, the rain softening to a gentle patter. A silence settled over the forest that felt unnatural. Too sudden, too complete. Diana stood still, listening, searching for any sign of movement. Nothing. She turned to head back toward the road, but before she could take a step, the crying started again, from a different direction. Left. Deeper into the woods. She hesitated, swinging her flashlight toward the sound, but the beam died before it reached anything recognizable. Only towering trunks, dripping branches, and a darkness so dense it seemed alive. She followed the sound again, calling out as she pushed through shrubs and low branches that scraped her arms. The crying stayed just ahead of her, always close enough to urge her forward, but never close enough to reveal its source. Minutes stretched into nearly an hour. The forest grew more tangled, more hostile, as if pushing her away and luring her in at the same time. Finally she stopped, chest heaving, heart pounding. She turned in a slow circle. She didn't recognize anything. Not the logs she'd stepped over, not the boulder she'd noted earlier, not even a faint orange glow from her hazard lights. She checked her phone. Dead. Not no signal, dead. Flashlight? Flickering, her breath trembled. The crying started again. But now it wasn't a child. Now it sounded like a grown woman, older, broken, grieving. The sobs vibrated through the trees, echoing like they were coming from every direction at once. Diana backed up, fear tightening around her ribs. The forest no longer felt like the same woodland she'd entered. The ground under her boots wasn't soft with pine needles anymore. It was hard-packed earth covered in dry leaves that crunched underfoot despite the rainfall. Trees around her had changed too. No more cedar or Douglas fir. These were ancient oaks, massive maples, trunks thick as houses, branches sprawling like skeletal arms. The air itself felt wrong, warmer, heavier, smelling faintly of sap and smoke. She turned and ran. Branches whipped her arms and face. Shadows shifted between the trees. Streams flowed uphill. Clearings formed perfect circles. The forest twisted around her like a maze. Then light. A faint, flickering amber glow. She stumbled through a thicket and into a clearing, and froze. Her truck was there. Her exact truck. Sitting dead center in the clearing. Hazard lights flashing. Reflective triangles placed neatly behind the trailer, as though the highway had simply evaporated and left her rig suspended in some impossible pocket of wilderness. Only, the highway was gone, completely. No pavement, no guardrail, no signs. Only colossal trees surrounding the clearing, trees older than anything in the Pacific Northwest. Ancient, towering, primordial. Diana approached slowly, her breath fogging in the cold air. The truck was solid, real. She yanked the door open, climbed inside, and tried the ignition. Nothing. No engine rumble, no dashboard lights. Every electrical system was dead. And then her flashlight went out. The crying returned, close now. Too close. She looked out her windshield and saw shapes emerging from the tree line. Women. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They moved toward the truck with the slow, drifting gait of sleepwalkers. Their clothes belonged to different centuries' pioneer dresses, loggers' wives in worn flannel, modern hikers with torn jackets. Sap-like tears streaked their cheeks, dripping onto their clothing in thick amber rivulets. Their eyes were the color of tree bark, and their hair swayed unnaturally, moving as though blown by a wind she couldn't feel. They circled her truck, brushing their fingers along the metal, leaving dark stains wherever they touched. Their faces were full of grief so deep it felt ancient, bottomless. One woman stepped closer to Diana's window. Her voice, when she spoke, sounded like wind moving through a forest canopy. "You cut our homes," she whispered. "You haul our bodies away to be turned into houses and furniture and paper. You profit from our death." Diana felt a tremor run through her, cold, sharp, undeniable. She had hauled timber her entire career. Never once had she thought about the forest it came from, the ecosystems destroyed by clear-cutting, the wildlife displaced. She'd always seen herself as just the transporter. "I didn't know," Diana whispered. "I was doing my job." "You never thought," the woman replied, her voice now layered with the voices of others. "You never remembered what the forest was before it became freight." More figures stepped forward. Women from different eras, some injured, some burned, some soaked, all burdened with a collective grief that pressed against the air like a physical weight. They mourned not only the forests destroyed, but the lives lost in logging accidents, in industrial fires, in collapsed camps. "Remember," they whispered in a single, resonating voice that made Diana's bones vibrate. "Remember what was lost before you carried it away. Remember the cost of your cargo." The sun began to rise. Light spread through the clearing like a veil being lifted. The ancient trees shrank back into cedars and firs. The clearing dissolved into a narrow gravel turnout beside Highway 199. The women faded, their forms becoming translucent and then vanishing entirely. The forest quieted. Diana realized she was sitting in her truck again, back where she'd broken down. The dashboard lights flickered back to life. The radio crackled. Her phone lit up. When she climbed out to check the engine, her radiator hose was intact, the coolant reservoir full. As if nothing had ever been wrong. But something had changed. When she opened her trailer in Crescent City, every piece of lumber, every board bore tiny handprints pressed into its surface. Child-sized. Dozens, maybe hundreds, visible only at certain angles but unmistakable. She quit her timber hauling job the next week. Now she hauls electronics and manufactured goods. But on quiet nights, with the windows cracked and the wind slipping through the pines, she still hears it. The faint, distant crying from deep within the woods. Some freight, she learned, carries more than weight. It carries memory. And some memories refuse to be forgotten. Tommy O'Sullivan had been watching the mile markers tick by when the first sliver of dread slid into his stomach. Mile 142. Mile 141. Mile 140. The green, reflective signs flashed past his windshield in smooth, perfect sequence. But something was wrong. Fatally wrong. He had been driving east on Interstate 95 through Maine for the past 2 hours. The numbers should have been going up, not down. He checked his GPS, confirmed his direction, and glanced at the old-school compass suctioned to his dash. Everything agreed. He was traveling eastbound toward Bangor. And still, the numbers fell. Mile 139. Mile 138. Mile 137. Tommy had hauled lobster equipment from Portland to coastal supply companies for 27 years. He knew every inch of I-95, every rest area, every truck stop between the Piscataqua River Bridge and the Canadian border. Interstate 95 ran north-south with mile markers increasing as you traveled north. But somehow, despite moving north, the markers were counting backward. Static filled the cab as he grabbed his CB, thumbed the button, and tried raising anyone who might be on the same stretch of highway. Breaker 19. This is Lobster Roll. Anyone else seeing mile markers running backward on I-95? A few seconds of soft hiss, then a gravelly voice answered. Lobster Roll, this is Pine Tree Express. What mile markers? I don't see any mile markers at all on this stretch. Tommy stared out the windshield just as mile 136 flashed past, bold and green in the headlights. Pine Tree, I'm looking at them right now. Clear as day. Mile markers counting down from 102. Green signs, white numbers. Lobster Roll. I've been running this route for 18 years. There are no mile markers between Augusta and Bangor. Construction crews removed them 6 months ago. Cold dread slid through him, colder than the October wind rattling the frame of his truck. If Pine Tree Express was telling the truth, then he was looking at signs that didn't exist. He pressed harder on the accelerator, hoping speed might break whatever was happening. But the mile markers answered him anyway. Mile 134. Mile 133. Mile 132. The forest on either side began to shift as well, as if the very world was rolling backward with the numbers. Tall, mature pines thinned into younger, narrower trees. The asphalt under his wheels looked strangely fresh, smoother, lacking the patches and repairs he knew so well. He checked his wristwatch, 9:16 p.m., October 14, 2024. Then glanced at his truck's digital clock, 9:04 feet. 1 minute earlier. He stared at both timepieces, breath-catching. After 60 real-time seconds on his watch, his truck's clock displayed 9,014. Time was moving backward, perfectly synchronized with the backward-falling mile markers. Mile 131. Mile 130. Mile 129. A flicker in the rearview mirror caught his eye, and when Tommy looked up, his breath left his lungs. His reflection looked younger, not dramatically, but undeniably. The gray dusting his temples had darkened. The tired lines carved by winters and long hauls had softened. He pulled down the visor mirror, younger by maybe 5 years. He tried to steady his breathing, but the CB crackled again, except the voice coming through was his own. His voice from years ago. Pine Tree Express, this is Lobster Roll. First time running this route. Any advice on truck stops between here and Bangor? Tommy grabbed the handset. I didn't just say that. But Pine Tree's voice came through again, answering the older broadcast. Lobster Roll, there's a good truck stop at exit 88. Clean showers, decent food, good folks. Welcome to the main runs. Cold prickles ran down Tommy's spine. He remembered that conversation. It had happened in 1998. His first week running freight through Maine. The mile markers weren't just pulling him through space, they were dragging him backward through time. Mile 127. Mile 126. Mile 125. The exit truck stop appeared exactly as it had in 1998. Fresh pavement, bright white paint. The restaurant sign unremodeled, untouched by 2 decades of renovations. He wanted the stop, to test the boundaries of whatever this was, but something deep in his chest screamed, no. Leave the highway and you'll never get back. His cargo manifest lay on the passenger seat. The text shimmered, the details shifted. Lobster traps and marine hardware for Bangor blurred into automotive parts for Presque Isle. The date changed from October 2024 to September 2009. His truck registration, insurance cards, and logbook all bent themselves backward, page by page, year by year. Mile 124. Mile 123. Mile 122. The CB filled again, this time with a chaotic tapestry of overlapping voices, every one of them his. Reporting weather in 2011. Asking directions in 2004. Complaining about diesel prices in 2016. Each version of himself echoing through the timeline, the interference painful and disorienting. One voice cut through the noise, him from August 2013, celebrating his first major contract extension. Pine Tree Express. This is Lobster Roll. Just got confirmation permanent main routes for me, looks like. Tommy remembered that day with painful clarity. a high point in his career. But now, mixed in with the excitement he heard in his younger voice, his older mind felt a wave of sadness. He knew what was coming. Sarah's cancer diagnosis in 2015, his son Michael dropping out of college in 2019, his father dying alone in a nursing home during the pandemic, mile 119, mile 118, mile 117. The road changed faster now. Guardrails aged backward into older designs. The highway narrowed, the forest crept closer. His hands on the wheel looked younger, his hairline fuller, his beard dark again. The aches in his joints vanished. But with his younger body came younger anxieties, worries he hadn't felt in decades. Money, bills, fear of losing jobs. He gripped the wheel tighter, heartbeat thudding with stress he thought he'd buried long ago. Mile 113. Mile 12, mile 111. The CB picked up another memory. The conversation from December 2002. His voice shaking as he told another driver about complications in Sarah's pregnancy. "I don't know if we can afford the medical bills if this gets worse. Insurance covers most of it, but the copays are killing us." He wanted to shout to his younger self that everything would be fine, that Sarah would deliver a healthy baby and recover quickly. But when he pressed the transmit button, nothing happened. He could hear the past, but he couldn't change it. Mile 108. Mile 17. Mile 16. The markers reached a threshold and Tommy felt it. A shift, like the gravity of time itself tightening around him. He was being pulled toward a specific moment. His truck's clock flicked to 8:02 p.m., but the GPS date now read July 7th, 2001. His stomach dropped. July 7th, 2001. That night. The night he received the phone call that shattered his world. The night Patrick, his older brother and a seasoned lobsterman, vanished in a sudden squall off Bar Harbor. The Coast Guard found his capsized boat. They never found his body. Mile 104. Mile 103. Mile 102. Tommy's phone began ringing. It played a ringtone he hadn't used in more than 20 years. Sarah home. He already knew what she would say. He couldn't take it, couldn't relive it. But the phone kept ringing, dragging him toward the moment, dragging him toward the wound. He answered. "Tommy, thank God." The Coast Guard called. Patrick's boat was found capsized near Schoodic Point. "Weather's getting worse. They're searching," but Tommy interrupted, voice shaking. "Sarah." "Listen to me. Call Patrick's phone. Keep calling until he answers. Don't let the Coast Guard stop searching. Patrick is alive. He needs help right now." He hung up before she could respond. Snatched the CB. Broadcasted on every channel. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Lobster Roll with emergency information. Lobsterman Patrick O'Sullivan, single occupant, in the water near Schoodic Point. Capsized. Alive. Needs immediate rescue. Any vessels nearby, respond." Mile 101. Mile 100. Mile 99. The timeline twisted around him. He could feel it, events bending, reshaping, fighting against their own history. Then a voice crackled through. "Lobster Roll. This is fishing vessel, Mary Catherine. We're 10 miles from Schoodic. Proceeding to search area now." The moment it came through, something in the air shifted. The relentless backward pull started to glitch, weaken. Time hesitated. Mile 98. Mile 97. Mile 96. His phone rang again. Sarah's voice was different this time, bursting with relief. "Tommy, they found him." Mary Catherine pulled him from the water about 20 minutes ago. "He's hypothermic, but alive. He's going to be okay." The backward mile markers slowed. Stuttered. Stopped. For the first time since mile 142, the numbers paused, then began rising. Mile 97. Mile 98. Mile 99. The world outside aged forward again, like time inhaling. His reflection matured, lines reappearing with each passing mile. The clock synced. The air steadied. Everything righted itself, but not perfectly. Everything had changed. His manifest shifted again, settling into something new. Emergency Marine Safety Equipment, destination, P. O'Sullivan Marine Services, Bar Harbor. Patrick's new business. A company that never existed before this night. A company founded because he survived. The CB was quiet. Pine Tree Express was gone. Maybe he had never existed in this timeline. Maybe they had only met because of the tragedy that no longer happened. Mile 114. Mile 114. Mile 116. Tommy drove on toward Bangor, carrying both sets of memories, the ones from the world he'd lived and the ones from the world he'd saved. By the time he completed his delivery and headed toward Bar Harbor, morning light touched the horizon. Patrick was waiting for him in this new reality. Older, alive, eager to show Tommy the safety innovations that would reshape Maine's fishing industry. The backward mile markers never appeared again. But Tommy carried the knowledge with him forever, that time could bend, roads could shift, and love could rewrite history itself. Some roads lead to the past, but the best ones bring you home. Rosa Gutierrez had been hauling refrigerated cargo for years, but the temperature alarm had never rattled her the way it did now. The shrill beeping sliced through the dark silence inside her Kenworth T's cab at 2 a.m. as she steered her rig through the industrial edge of Bakersfield, California. She glanced at the digital display, expecting a minor fluctuation, but the number made her breath catch. The trailer temperature had surged to 47 degrees Fahrenheit, far above the 36 required to keep her premium beef shipments safe. For someone like Rosa, whose livelihood depended on spotless cargo integrity, this was a nightmare. She pulled into an all-night truck stop, parked under the flickering fluorescent lights, and walked toward the back of her trailer. Cold air brushed her arms as she approached, but the refrigeration engine's steady hum told her the system itself wasn't failing. She unlocked the inspection panel, expecting to find faulty wiring or a blown fuse, but instead found sensors working perfectly, except they weren't monitoring beef at all. The realization prickled at her skin like static. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The manifest claimed she was hauling premier-grade beef products, 8,000 pounds bound for restaurant supply in downtown Los Angeles. She'd picked up the load from Mountain Valley Meat Processing in Fresno, a facility she'd serviced countless times. The paperwork had been clean, the loading crew familiar, and the cargo strapped and documented exactly the way the Department of Agriculture required. A routine job. But the smell wasn't routine. Rosa had hauled every kind of meat imaginable. Beef, pork, poultry, game. She could distinguish cuts by scent alone. But this odor drifting from the seams of her trailer wasn't anything she recognized. It wasn't sour like spoiled beef. It wasn't metallic like blood. It was something else entirely, a scent that made her stomach twist before she even opened the doors. She swung the heavy metal latches and pulled the trailer doors wide. Cold vapor curled out. She raised her flashlight and froze. Dozens of white plastic-wrapped packages hung from the rails overhead, suspended by hooks and chains exactly the way meat should be, except these weren't shaped like any meat she had ever hauled. They were too long, too irregular, too wrong, and the plastic wasn't the food-safe kind she knew. This was thick, industrial, opaque. The kind used for disposal, not preservation. Heart hammering, Rosa climbed inside and approached one of the bulky shapes. Her flashlight beam cut through the semi-translucent plastic, and what she saw made her breath hitch. Beneath the wrap was an unmistakable silhouette, an arm bent at an unnatural angle. A leg. The curve of a torso with proportions that had nothing to do with cattle. Her hands trembled. She staggered back, ripping a metal rail for balance. She wasn't hauling beef, she was hauling human remains. Rosa stumbled out of the trailer, forcing her breath to steady enough to pull out her phone. She didn't care about protocol, didn't care about her job. She was calling the police. But before she could dial, her phone rang. The caller ID stopped her cold. Martinez. Her night shift dispatcher at Central Valley Transport Solutions. The man who rarely spoke more than necessary. Gutierrez, he barked. What's your status? GPS shows you stopped in Bakersfield. Martinez, she whispered. There's a problem with the shipment. This is not beef. I know there are human bodies in my trailer. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Long enough that Rosa wondered if the call dropped. Then his voice came back, colder than she'd ever heard it. Rosa, listen carefully. That cargo is exactly what the manifest says it is. You picked it up from an authorized facility? You will deliver it to the specified destination. Any deviation from route will lead to serious consequences for you and your family. She felt her chest tighten. I've been hauling meat for years. I know what beef looks like. These are people. Another pause. Then his voice sharpened, every word a blade. Your daughter attends Lincoln Elementary in Modesto. Your mother lives alone on Pine Street. Your ex-husband Carlos works night security at the mall. We know where they are. We can reach them anytime we want, deliver the cargo. Or they disappear. The words hit her harder than any impact she'd survived behind the wheel. He knew everything. Information she'd never given her employer. Information he shouldn't have had. Central Valley Transport Solutions wasn't a freight company. It was a criminal network, and she had been feeding it for years without knowing. What do you want me to do? She whispered, defeated. Drive to Los Angeles. Make the delivery. Forget what you think you saw. Continue working for us. Do that, and your family stays alive. Disobey, and they join the cargo. The line went dead. Rosa stood motionless in the parking lot, surrounded by the ordinary sounds of truckers fueling up and chatting, their worlds untouched by the horror suffocating her. She felt the walls closing in, her life narrowing to a single impossible choice: deliver the bodies and live with the guilt, or refuse and lose everyone she loved. She climbed into her cab, wiped her eyes, and turned the key. She would drive, she would deliver, but she would also think, and she would survive. As she pulled back on the Highway 99, she noticed headlights appear behind her. The vehicle kept perfect distance, too perfect. When she accelerated, it accelerated. When she slowed, it slowed. She wasn't just being watched, she was being herded. She grabbed her CB radio. Static. Tried another channel. More static. She checked her phone. No signal. They had isolated her. Through Delano, Wasco, and Buttonwillow, the headlights stayed glued to her like a shadow she could never outrun. Every mile tightened the knot inside her chest. At 3 in the morning, the alarm shrieked again, but this time the temperature was plummeting, 21 degrees and still falling. Someone remotely activated the deep freeze function. Her trailer wasn't just refrigerated. It was a mobile storage vault. A morgue on wheels controlled by people who saw her as nothing more than an unwitting accomplice they could manipulate. The delivery address in downtown Los Angeles appeared legitimate from the outside. A meat processing facility with bright lights and clean concrete docks. But when Rosa backed into the loading bay, the workers who met her didn't look at her, didn't speak, didn't hesitate. They moved with cold precision, unloading the packages like it was routine. The realization made Rosa's skin crawl. This wasn't their first time. And she wasn't the only driver. A thin man approached her cab. His eyes were dead, the same deadness she'd heard in Martinez's voice. Excellent work, Rosa. Your next pickup is tomorrow night. Same procedures. Same requirements. Same consequences. I want out, she said, barely keeping her voice steady. I won't transport any more bodies. The man smiled. But it wasn't a smile, it was a warning. Rosa, you have been transporting bodies for over a year. Every shipment you thought was beef or pork was human remains. We have video of every delivery. We have recordings of you confirming cargo. Documents naming you as a key member of our network. Try to expose us, and you will be prosecuted for multiple murders. Her blood turned to ice. They had been using her from the beginning, building evidence against her, making sure that if she ever resisted, they could destroy her life with a single phone call. She drove away, feeling the trap snap shut. But beneath the fear, something else started to burn. Something fierce. Something dangerous. They thought a mother would fold under pressure. They had no idea how wrong they were. For 2 weeks, Rosa pretended to comply. She did every pickup, every delivery, every check-in, exactly as they expected. But behind their backs, she documented everything. License plates, facility locations, faces, routines, schedules. She photographed equipment, memorized guard rotations, and quietly assembled a map of their entire network. They had shown her their system. They had trusted her to move their dead. They had given her access. They didn't realize that she wasn't gathering evidence for the police. She was gathering it for herself. Her final delivery was scheduled on a moonless night. The criminals expected another load of bodies, but when Rosa backed into their central facility, her trailer didn't hold victims. It held explosives. Years earlier, her ex-husband, an Army demolitions expert, had taught her everything he knew. She kept those skills tucked away, forgotten, until she needed them. Every package in her trailer was rigged with a timer set to detonate after she cleared the area. The workers opened the doors, expecting another shipment of death. They didn't even have time to react. When the explosion hit, it tore through the facility, ripping apart the leadership of the network and obliterating the evidence used to blackmail her and countless other drivers. Without the brains, the infrastructure, and the coordination, the rest of the organization scattered into the shadows. And Rosa walked away. She moved her family to Oregon, cut ties with long-haul trucking, and took a job driving local deliveries for a company that handled legitimate freight. A quieter life, a safer life. But sometimes, late at night, when the highway is dark and a refrigerated truck passes her by, she feels the old fear stir. She wonders how many other drivers are out there right now, unknowingly hauling things that should never be hauled. How many families are being threatened? How many innocent people are trapped the way she once was? The meat truck killers had chosen the wrong woman to intimidate, and they paid for it with their lives. Some cargo should never be delivered, some threats should never be made, and some drivers refused to be victims.